Hey everyone! Get ready to plunge into an epic saga of betrayal, hidden fortunes, and hard-won redemption that'll keep you hooked from beginning to end. Before we start, here's the call. Join this community by subscribing to stay in the flow of this incredible tale. It's a whirlwind of family secrets, unexpected wealth, and a battle for justice that hits hard. We're about to follow a woman who gave her all, only to be discarded, until a secret stash of millions turned the tables. This isn't just a story. It's a ride you won't want to step off. We want your voice. Share your thoughts below. Ever been blindsided by someone close? What would you do with a windfall you never expected? Your ideas fuel the fire of this narrative, so jump in. If it grabs you right away, hit that like button and pass it along to others. Let's make this a living, breathing space. Subscribe now, add your take, and settle in for the full experience. It's time to begin. My son kicked me out when he found out I lost my job, but he had no idea I had a secret fortune. I never imagined my life would take such a sharp, bewildering turn at the age of 58. That day, I stepped through the front door of the house I'd bought with every ounce of my sweat and tears, a house I'd sacrificed everything to give to Ethan, the son I'd adopted when he was nothing more than a frail, blue-lipped infant trembling in my arms. For 30 years, I'd poured my soul into raising him. I nursed him through endless hospital stays when his congenital heart defect threatened to steal him away. I worked double shifts, sometimes triple, scrubbing floors, waiting tables, stitching handmade crafts by lamplight just to scrape together enough for his college tuition. I gave up my marriage, my chance at having my own children, my own dreams, all so he could have a better life than the one fate had first dealt him. But that day when I told Ethan I was no longer working for Catherine, my last employer, who'd secretly left me a fortune of $8 million, he didn't even let me finish. His face darkened, his voice slicing through the air like a blade. "You quit your job? $8,000 a month gone? What now, Mom? You planning to just sit around and mooch off us?" I stood there frozen, as if someone had slapped me hard across the face. The little spark of joy I'd felt walking through that door, coming home after years of living away, vanished in an instant. I'd hoped he'd be relieved, maybe even happy, that I was back to support him and Nicole, his sharp-tongued wife, as they prepared to welcome their first child. Instead, I was a burden. Nicole, with that cutting condescension she'd inherited straight from her mother Susan, didn't hesitate to pile on. "Postpartum care is a science," she said, her voice flat and cold. "Not something a former housekeeper like you could possibly understand." Susan, ever the queen of disdain, chimed in without missing a beat. "Exactly, Margaret. If you're staying here, you'll at least need to cover the nanny's salary. I'll handle the hiring, of course." Ethan, the boy I'd given my entire life to, didn't defend me. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he raised his voice, his words hammering into me like nails. "You should keep working, Mom. Another 20 years at least. You're only 58, you're in great shape. Save the retirement talk for when you're 80. 20 more years." The idea hollowed me out. I'd been grinding away since he was a toddler, my hands calloused, my back bent, my youth traded away for his future. And now, at 58, I was still nothing more than a machine to them, a cash dispenser with no expiration date. I didn't cry, though the tears burned at the edges of my eyes. I just looked at him, my voice trembling but firm. "I'm retiring. That's my decision, and no one gets to change it." Susan's demeanor shifted instantly, her tone softening into something falsely sympathetic. "Well, if you're set on not working, I know a senior residence nearby. Good facilities, decent meals. They're always looking for kitchen help or janitors, something to earn your keep." Nicole smirked, tossing her hair. "Perfect fit, actually. You can't expect us to support you forever." The room spun for a moment. I'd walked into this house, my house, the one I'd bought with every penny I'd saved over decades of labor, expecting a warm welcome, maybe even a shred of gratitude. Instead, I was being sized up like a worn-out tool, ready to be tossed aside or repurposed for their convenience. I didn't lash out. I didn't scream. I just turned to Ethan, the child I'd raised single-handedly, and waited for him to say something, anything, to prove I still mattered to him. But he didn't. He just stared back, his jaw tight, his eyes cold. That was the moment I stopped swallowing my pride. For years I'd let them walk over me, Ethan, Nicole, Susan, all of them. I'd bitten my tongue, forced smiles, buried my hurt, all to keep the peace. But no more. I straightened my spine, lifted my chin, and said, "I'm done here." I reached for my suitcase, the one I'd barely unpacked, and started toward the door. Ethan's voice exploded behind me. "You think you suffered? That was your choice, Mom. If you hadn't divorced Dad, we wouldn't have ended up broke. I could have grown up rich, you ruined that. You owe me for the rest of your life." I stopped, my hand on the doorknob, but I didn't turn around. He had no idea. None. The only reason I divorced his father, Richard, was for him. Richard hadn't wanted Ethan. Not after we adopted him. Not after the endless medical bills and sleepless nights. He'd given me an ultimatum. Send Ethan back to the orphanage or walk away from our marriage. I chose Ethan. I chose to save him from a life of abandonment, to give him a chance at something better, even if it meant tearing my own world apart. Every sacrifice, every tear, every backbreaking hour. I'd done it all for him. But now, standing there with his words ringing in my ears, I realized he'd never see it that way. To him, I was the villain, the source of every hardship he'd ever faced. I didn't respond. I just opened the door and stepped outside, the weight of my suitcase pulling at my arm. Behind me, I heard the crash of it hitting the floor. Ethan had kicked it over in a fit of rage. "Don't come crawling back when you're old and broke," he shouted as the door slammed shut. The sound echoed in the quiet street, a final punctuation to 30 years of devotion. The air outside was cool, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the lawn. I stood there for a moment, breathing deeply, letting the reality sink in. I was 58 years old, jobless by choice, and now homeless by their decree. But I wasn't broken, not yet. They didn't know about the $8 million sitting in a trust fund with my name on it. A secret I'd kept even from myself until that moment. Catherine, my late employer, had changed everything. She wasn't just a boss. She was a woman of grace and wealth who'd seen something in me no one else ever had. For years, I'd worked as her live-in housekeeper, but she'd treated me like family, like a younger sister. She'd taught me to play the piano, to paint, to appreciate literature. And when she passed away, she left me everything. Not out of pity, but out of respect. "Margaret," her will had read, "you deserve this more than anyone I've ever known." I hadn't told Ethan or Nicole about it. At first, I'd planned to use it to secure their future, to give them the life I'd always dreamed they'd have. But after today, I saw the truth. They didn't deserve it. They didn't even deserve me. I pulled out my phone and booked a room at the city's most exclusive 5-star hotel. As I climbed into the taxi, I dialed Catherine's private attorney, a man named Harold Grayson, who'd handled the transfer of the trust. "Harold," I said when he picked up, my voice steady now, "it's time to start the process. I want everything that's mine, starting with the house." "Yes, Margaret," he replied, his tone calm and professional. "I'll get the paperwork ready. Anything else?" I paused, glancing out the window as the familiar streets blurred past. "Not yet," I said. "But soon." That night, I lay in the hotel's plush bed, staring at the ceiling. The room was a world away from the cramped apartments and dingy rentals I'd lived in for decades, but I barely noticed the luxury. My mind was spinning, replaying every moment of the day. Ethan's anger, Nicole's sneer, Susan's calculated cruelty. I thought about the house too, the one I'd bought for them when Ethan was still in college dating Nicole. I'd moved to another city back then, taken the live-in job with Catherine, just to save enough to give them a head start. They hadn't paid a dime for it, yet the deed bore only their names. Back then they cried tears of gratitude, promising, "One day, Mom, when we're better off, we'll take care of you. You'll get the life you deserve." I believed them. I'd clung to that promise like a lifeline through every lonely night, every aching day. But now I saw it for what it was. A lie sugar-coated to keep me working, keep me giving, until I had nothing left to offer. I rolled over, pressing my face into the pillow to stifle the sob that finally broke free. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the realization that I'd let it happen. I'd let them drain me dry, convinced myself it was love, when all along it was nothing more than greed wearing a mask. But that was over now. I wasn't the mother who got stepped on anymore. I wasn't the doormat they could kick around. I had $8 million, a fortune they'd never touch. And for the first time in my life, I had the power to stand up for myself. As sleep finally pulled me under, a single thought crystallized in my mind. Ethan didn't know it yet, but the price of betraying me would be far greater than he could ever imagine. The hotel room was a cocoon of silence, a stark contrast to the chaos I'd left behind at Ethan's house. I woke to the soft hum of the air conditioner and the faint glow of dawn seeping through the heavy curtains. For a moment I lay still, letting the reality of the previous day settle over me like a thick fog. I was 58, jobless by choice, and cast out by the sun I'd raised with every fiber of my being. But I wasn't empty-handed. Tucked away in a trust fund, hidden from the world, and most importantly from Ethan, was $8 million. A fortune that had fallen into my lap like a gift from the heavens. It was a secret I'd kept close, not out of greed, but out of a quiet hope that I could use it to build something beautiful for my family. That hope had died yesterday, snuffed out by their venomous words and cold indifference. I sat up, the crisp sheets sliding off my shoulders, and reached for my phone on the nightstand. The screen lit up with a text from Harold Grayson, Catherine's attorney. Documents are prepared. Meet me at 10 a.m. to discuss next steps. I glanced at the clock. 7:32 a.m. Plenty of time to pull myself together. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and padded to the bathroom, the marble floor cool against my bare feet. As I stood under the shower's warm spray, letting the water wash away the lingering ache in my chest, my thoughts drifted to Catherine, the woman who'd changed everything. Catherine Elizabeth Harrow wasn't just my employer. She was a force of nature. I'd met her 15 years ago, when Ethan was still in college and I was desperate for a better-paying job to support him and Nicole. A friend had tipped me off about a live-in housekeeping position in a neighboring city, working for a wealthy widow who needed someone reliable. I'd hesitated. Leaving Ethan behind felt like abandoning him, but he'd insisted I go. "We need the money, Mom," he'd said, his voice firm. "Nicole's family keeps looking down on us. I want to prove them wrong." So I packed a single suitcase and moved into Catherine's sprawling estate, a grand old house perched on a hill overlooking a quiet valley. From the outside, Catherine was everything I wasn't. Elegant, cultured, born into a world of privilege. Her family had made their fortune in shipping generations ago, and though she'd never married or had children, she carried herself with the grace of someone who'd never known want. Her hair was a cascade of silver, her eyes a piercing blue that seemed to see straight through you. But beneath that polished exterior was a warmth I hadn't expected. She didn't treat me like a servant. On my first day, as I scrubbed the kitchen counters, she'd wandered in with a cup of tea and said, "Margaret, sit down for a moment. Tell me about yourself." I'd been so startled I nearly dropped the sponge. Over the years, our relationship grew into something I couldn't quite name. She wasn't just a boss or a friend. She was a mentor, a confidant, a sister I'd never had. When she found out I'd never finished high school, she insisted on teaching me. Evenings that should have been spent cleaning became lessons in literature, art, and music. She'd sit at her grand piano, her fingers dancing over the keys, and beckon me over. "Come, Margaret, try it," she'd say, her voice gentle but firm. "You've got a good ear." I'd fumble through the notes, my hands clumsy from years of manual labor, but she never laughed. She'd just smile and say, "Keep going. You'll get it." Catherine didn't stop at music. She gave me books, Jane Austen, Hemingway, poetry I'd never heard of, and we'd discuss them over tea. She taught me to paint, setting up an easel in her sunroom and guiding my brushstrokes until I could capture the curve of a flower or the shadow of a tree. "You've got a soul for this, Margaret," she'd tell me. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I'd blush and mumble something about being too old to learn, but she'd wave it off. "Nonsense. Life's too short to stop growing." I didn't realize how much she'd changed me until she was gone. 2 years ago she'd fallen ill, cancer, the doctors said, too advanced to treat. I stayed by her side, cooking her meals, reading to her when she was too weak to hold a book. She passed quietly one spring morning, her hand in mine, a faint smile on her lips. I'd thought that was the end of our story, until Harold called me to his office a week later. "Catherine left you everything," he'd said, sliding a stack of papers across his desk. "The house, the investments, the trust fund. $8 million all in your name." I'd stared at him, my mouth dry. "There must be a mistake," I'd whispered. "I'm just the housekeeper." Harold shook his head. "No mistake. She wrote a letter too." He handed me an envelope, and with trembling hands I opened it. Her elegant script filled the page. Margaret, you've been more family to me than anyone I've ever known. You're strong, kind, and deserving of a life you've never had the chance to live. Take this and make it yours. With all my love, Catherine. I'd cried then, harder than I had at her funeral. It wasn't just the money, it was the trust, the belief she'd had in me. I'd kept it secret, even from Ethan, because I wanted to surprise him. I dreamed of handing it all over one day, paying off their mortgage, setting up a college fund for their future child, giving them the security I'd never had. But now, as I stepped out of the shower and wrapped myself in a plush hotel towel, I knew they'd never see a cent of it. They didn't deserve it. They didn't even deserve me. By 10 a.m., I was sitting across from Harold in his sleek downtown office, a cup of coffee warming my hands. He was a wiry man in his 60s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. The trust is airtight, he said, tapping a folder on his desk. Catherine made sure of that. The funds are yours free and clear. What do you want to do with them? I took a sip of coffee, letting the bitter warmth steady me. First, I want the house back, I said. The one I bought for Ethan and Nicole. It's in their names, but every dollar came from me. Can we reverse it? Harold raised an eyebrow. Legally, it's tricky. You gifted it to them, and the deed's been transferred. But if you can prove coercion or undue influence, say that they pressured you into it, we might have a case. Do you have any documentation? Receipts, bank statements? I nodded. I kept everything. Every withdrawal, every payment. It's all in a box at my old apartment. Good, he said, jotting a note. Bring it to me. We'll start there. Anything else? I hesitated, then leaned forward. I want to start over, Harold. A new house, a new life. Somewhere they can't touch me. He smiled faintly, the first crack in his professional mask. That I can help with. Catherine would have liked that. That afternoon I checked out of the hotel and moved my few belongings to a temporary rental. A small tidy apartment on the edge of the city. Then I drove to the gated villa community I'd heard about. A place where the city's elite lived behind high walls and manicured lawns. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe just a glimpse of the life I could now afford. But as I stepped into the showroom, I felt a shift inside me. This wasn't just about money. It was about claiming something for myself, something they couldn't take away. The lobby was all glass and marble, buzzing with well-dressed buyers and eager sales agents. A young woman with a bright smile approached me. Good afternoon, ma'am. Would you like a tour of the model homes? I nodded, following her toward the display area, when a sharp voice cut through the hum of conversation. Who's handling client screening today? Do we just let anyone walk in now? I turned to see Chloe, Susan's niece, Nicole's cousin, striding toward me, her heels clicking with authority. She was in her late 20s, with long hair and a smirk that dripped arrogance. We'd met a handful of times at family gatherings, and she'd always treated me like dirt beneath her designer shoes. Margaret, she said, her eyes narrowing. What are you doing here? A housekeeper? Don't tell me you're here for the free coffee. The room quieted, heads turning, whispers rippling through the crowd. I kept my voice calm. I'm here to view a property. Is that a problem? Chloe laughed, a harsh, grating sound. You? Afford this place? I've seen your type, pretending to be buyers just to snag some snacks. She waved at two security guards. Escort her out. I raised a hand, stopping the guards mid-step. I came to buy a house. On what grounds are you kicking me out? Where's your manager? I turned to the onlookers. Have I done anything wrong? Chloe crossed her arms, sneering. Go ahead, make a scene. Let's see how far this act gets you. A young man in a crisp white shirt approached, his smile polite but firm. Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Alex, the sales manager. Is there an issue? Before I could speak, Chloe jumped in. She's just here for the freebies, Alex. I was having her removed. Alex frowned. Ma'am, could you show us some financial verification? This is an invitation-only showcase. I pulled a folder from my bag, documents I'd picked up from Harold that morning, and handed it to him. Chloe snatched it first, flipping it open with a dramatic flourish. $5 million, she shouted, loud enough for the whole room to hear. A housekeeper? This is fake. I know her, she's nobody. I didn't argue. I just opened my banking app and held up my phone. The young assistant beside me gasped, counting under her breath. 1 million. Oh my God, over 8 million. The crowd erupted in murmurs, eyes widening. Chloe's face drained of color, cycling from red to pale green to ghost white. Alex's expression darkened. Chloe, that's enough. He turned to me, his tone respectful. Ma'am, I apologize. This was a mistake. I'll assign our best manager to assist you. I waved him off, nodding at the young assistant. No need. She's fine. I want her to handle it. I pointed to a model villa in the center of the showroom. Soaring ceilings, a sunlit garden fully furnished. I'll take that one. And another as an investment. Let's get the paperwork started. Chloe muttered something under her breath. Glorified errand maid. But I ignored her. By the end of the hour, I'd signed contracts for 2 villas, paid in full, and walked out with my head high. Chloe was left seething, her smugness shattered. It was my first taste of victory, a small but satisfying step toward reclaiming my life. But I knew it was only the beginning. Ethan, Nicole, Susan. They'd come for me soon enough, sniffing out the money like hounds on a scent. And when they did, I'd be ready. The first few days after buying the villas felt like a dream I hadn't dared to dream. I moved into the larger of the two. A sprawling sunlit house with floor-to-ceiling windows and a garden that bloomed with roses and wisteria. The furniture was sleek and modern, a far cry from the second-hand couches and chip tables I'd lived with for decades. I spent my mornings sipping coffee in the sunroom, my afternoons wandering the gated community's quiet streets, letting the weight of my old life peel away layer by layer. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up to an alarm clock or a list of chores. I wasn't anyone's mother, anyone's servant. I was just Margaret, free, wealthy, and finally in control. But freedom, I soon learned, came with a price. Ethan didn't waste time. A week after I'd settled in, my phone buzzed with a text from Monica, the young sales assistant who'd closed my villa deals. Margaret, I hate to bother you, but you should know. Ethan's been talking about you online. It's not good. My stomach tightened. I hadn't spoken to him since that day he'd kicked over my suitcase and screamed that I owed him for life. I'd blocked his number, Nicole's, Susan's, every tie to that toxic tangle of a family. But I should have known he wouldn't let it go quietly. I opened my laptop, fingers trembling slightly as I typed his name into StreamNet, the social media platform everyone seemed obsessed with these days. There it was, a channel titled How My Mother Abandoned Me. With Ethan's face splashed across the thumbnail, red-eyed, tear-streaked, a portrait of wounded innocence. The view count was staggering, tens of thousands already, and climbing by the minute. I clicked play and his voice filled the room, raw and accusing. My mother never really loved me, he began, his tone quivering just enough to tug at the heartstrings. I worked so hard, studied my ass off, and she wouldn't even support me in the smallest ways. The year I got into college, she left for another city to work as a live-in assistant for rich people, leaving me alone in a tiny rental apartment. When I got married, she didn't contribute a single dollar. Even when my wife got pregnant, she didn't offer a shred of help. Now she's suddenly rich, lives in a mansion, rides in luxury cars, enjoys an upper-class life, while I'm out here getting judged and humiliated on the streets. I don't even want her money. I just want her to acknowledge me as her son. But she won't even say my name. The comments section was a flood of outrage and pity. What kind of mother does that? One user wrote. He's so pitiful. I'd do anything to give him the love he never had. Another gushed. She should be ashamed. Heartless. My hands clenched into fists as I scrolled. He'd twisted everything. Every sacrifice, every choice, into a sob story that painted me as the villain and him as the victim. The truth didn't matter to these strangers. They saw a young man crying on camera, and that was enough. I clicked deeper. He'd been streaming daily, each video more dramatic than the last. In one, he held up an old photo of us, me smiling, him a gangly teenager in a graduation cap, and wept as he tore it in half. This is all I have left of her, he sobbed. She threw me away like trash. In another, he showed off a stack of bills, claiming, this is what I'm drowning in because she cut me off. The lies piled up, and with them, his follower count soared. He'd even started selling merchandise, t-shirts emblazoned with the warmth your mother never gave you, and raking in donations from his so-called supporters. It was a performance, a calculated grift, and it was working. I slammed the laptop shut, my breath coming in shallow bursts. Rage simmered in my chest, but beneath it was something sharper hurt. This wasn't just about money for Ethan. It was about control, about punishing me for daring to walk away. He couldn't stand that I'd stopped being his ATM, his doormat. So he'd turned to the one weapon he knew would hit hardest, public shame. For a day I did nothing. I paced the villa, replaying his words, wrestling with the urge to call him and scream the truth. But I knew better. He'd twist that too, use my anger as more fuel for his narrative. No, I needed to fight smarter. If he wanted a war on social media, I'd give him one, and I'd win. The next evening I sat down with my laptop again, this time with a plan. I registered my own StreamNet account and created a channel. So this is the mom who abandoned Ethan. I didn't care about subtlety, I wanted his audience to see it, to click out of curiosity. Then I dropped into his latest live stream, where he was mid-rant about how I'd stolen his future. Without a word, I sent a flurry of donations, $5,000 in total, lighting up his chat feed with my username. The comments erupted. Who's that? Holy crap, big spender. Before they could settle, I typed a message for all to see. Hi everyone. I'm the heartless mother Ethan's been crying about. He says I cut him off? Come to my channel tonight. I'll show you the truth. Plus $100,000 in cash prizes. First come, first served. The bait worked. Within minutes, viewers flooded my stream, the numbers ticking up so fast I could barely keep track. I started with the prizes, random $500 and $1,000 payouts to commenters, hooking them with the thrill of free money. The chat exploded. Thank you, Sugar Mama. This is the real content queen. She's more loving than my own mom. Riding the viral momentum, I turned on my webcam, took a deep breath and spoke. First things first. I began, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. Yes, I cut off financial ties with Ethan. But that doesn't make me heartless, and it doesn't mean I abandoned him. You deserve the full story. Not the half-truths he's been feeding you. I leaned closer to the camera. When I got an inheritance from my late employer, I planned to leave it all to Ethan and his wife Nicole. $8 million, every cent. But when I told them I'd lost my job, their first reaction wasn't gratitude or concern. They accused me of freeloading, teamed up to throw me out of the house I'd bought for them, and told me I should keep working like a machine to fund their lifestyle. To them, I wasn't a mother. I was a bank account. I uploaded a scan of the trust documents, a notarized statement from Catherine's estate, showing the $8 million in my name. This money came from a woman who treated me like family, I said. She had no children, and I was her sole beneficiary. It's legal, it's mine, and I earned it through years of loyalty and hard work. The chat lit up. Lost $9 million. What kind of employer does that? Finally, karma rewarding a good heart. This isn't cold, it's clarity. Not everyone bought it. You're his mother, one skeptic typed. Aren't you supposed to support your kid? Cutting him off after marriage sounds cold-blooded. I didn't flinch. Let me ask you this, I replied, my tone firm. Does supporting a child mean being their personal ATM forever? I raised him alone since he was 1 year old. Paid his school fees, bought him a house, their house. What did I get? Suspicion, rejection, disrespect. They kicked me out the second I stopped earning for them. Then I played my ace. An audio clip I'd gotten from Harold. It was Ethan on the phone with a friend of Susan's, arranging for me to work as a live-in assistant for an elderly man. She's still got years in her. Ethan's voice crackled through the speakers. She can earn her keep and send us the cash. The comments exploded again. Unbelievable. This isn't mooching, it's financial abuse. Cutting him off isn't cruelty, it's survival. He's not crying for love, he's crying for money. I wasn't done. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a quiet, steely calm. Here's the thing. I didn't need to cut ties with Ethan instantly, because Ethan was never my biological son to begin with. The chat filled with question marks. Pressed on. I adopted him when he was 1 year old, volunteering at a local orphanage. He was born with a severe heart defect, abandoned by his birth parents in a dumpster. He was barely alive when I found him. I brought him home out of pure compassion. I spent every penny I had on his medical care. My divorce? That wasn't about infidelity. It was because my ex-husband refused to raise an adopted child. I chose Ethan over my marriage, over my chance to have my own kids. I worked night shifts, waited tables, cleaned homes, whatever it took to keep him alive. I put him through college, bought him a house. And in return, he kicked me out like a stranger. I uploaded the proof, hospital bills, adoption papers, tuition receipts, even faded bus tickets from my years of commuting to low-wage jobs. The chat went wild. He's vile. Who does that to a woman who saved his life? He used her like a sponge, then threw her away. Living in the house she paid for and still kicked her out. Unbelievable. God gave him life, she gave him everything else, and he stabbed her in the back. The backlash was instant. Viewers swarmed Ethan's stream, flooding his comments with outrage. How could we ever support someone like you? Shame on you. You played the victim while bleeding your mother dry. You're the heartless one, not her. I watched his latest video live. His face paling, his voice rising in panic. Why are you all believing her? He shouted. She's lying. If I wasn't her real son, why'd she do all that for me? She's manipulating you. No one would go that far for a kid that isn't theirs. I didn't hesitate. Back on my stream, I uploaded the adoption certificate, a government-issued record verified and authentic. This is the truth, I said. He's not my blood, but I loved him like he was. I gave him everything, and he turned it into a weapon against me. Ethan doubled down. So what if I wasn't her real kid? He screamed on his channel. She didn't have to save me. I never asked her to. Maybe if she hadn't taken me in, I'd have been adopted by a real family. She ruined my life. She never should have interfered with my fate. That was the final straw. The internet erupted. You're mad she saved you? That's the most disgusting thing I've ever heard. Let the whole world see this monster's true face. Report him. He doesn't deserve a platform. Within hours, public opinion flipped completely. Ethan went from abandoned victim to ungrateful parasite. His followers abandoned him en masse. His donation ticker dried up, and moderators flagged his channel for review. By midnight, StreamNet suspended his account permanently, citing violations of their community guidelines. The comments on my stream turned triumphant. You ended him, Queen. Justice served. He messed with the wrong mom. But I wasn't finished. The next morning I called Harold. File the lawsuit, I told him. Defamation, harassment, emotional distress. Everything we've got. I want compensation, and I want him silenced legally. Harold didn't miss a beat. Already drafting it. We've got the recordings, the adoption papers, the trust documents, airtight evidence. He won't wriggle out of this. A week later, the case hit the courts. Ethan didn't show up. Rumor was he'd fled the city, but his absence didn't matter. The judge ruled in my favor. Guilty of defamation and cyber harassment. He was ordered to pay $250,000 in damages and cover my legal fees, a sum he'd never scraped together. An injunction barred him from mentioning me online or in public ever again. Best of all, Harold's team dug into the house ownership. With bank records proving I'd funded every penny, we filed to reverse the title transfer, arguing coercion and unjust enrichment. The process would take months, but I knew I'd win that too. Nicole filed for divorce the day after the ruling. I heard through Monica that she'd signed the papers without a word. Her face blank, her composure icy. Ethan had lost everything, his wife, his platform, his credibility. He vanished from my life, or so I thought. The war was over and I'd come out on top. But as I sat in my villa that night, staring at the roses glowing under the moonlight, I couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan wasn't done. He'd always been stubborn, always vengeful. If he couldn't have my money, he'd try to take my peace. I was right. But that's a story for another day. Victory tasted sweet, but it didn't last long. After the court ruling and Ethan's public downfall, I thought I'd finally found peace. The villa was my sanctuary. Its high ceilings and sun-drenched rooms a daily reminder that I'd escaped the chains of my old life. I spent my days tending the garden, painting in the sunroom, sipping coffee as the morning light spilled over the lake beyond my gates. The house reclamation process was underway, and Harold assured me it was only a matter of time before the title was mine again. Nicole's divorce from Ethan had severed the last thread tying me to that family, or so I believed. For a fleeting moment, I let myself imagine a future where I was truly free. But Ethan wasn't finished. I should have known. He'd never been one to slink away quietly. His pride was too brittle, his greed too deep. A week after the injunction, I noticed the first signs of trouble. Neighbors in the gated community, people who'd once nodded politely as I passed, began to avoid my gaze. Their smiles thinned, their hellos grew clipped. At first I chalked it up to coincidence. Maybe they were just busy. But then the whispers started. I caught fragments of them at the community mailbox. She's not what she seems. All that money, where'd it really come from? One morning a rock sailed through my kitchen window, shattering the glass and sending my coffee mug crashing to the floor. Scrawled across it in black marker was a single word. Liar. My heart sank. This wasn't random. It was Ethan, his fingerprints were all over it. He couldn't attack me online anymore. Not with the injunction, but he'd found another way. I called Monica, who'd become an unexpected ally after the villa sale. Have you heard anything? I asked, my voice tight. She hesitated, then sighed. Margaret, I didn't want to worry you, but there are rumors going around. People are saying you're a fraud, that the 8 million came from something shady, not Catherine. They're calling you a con artist, a gold digger. I don't know who's spreading it, but it's getting ugly. I hung up, my hands trembling. Ethan couldn't touch my money, so he was targeting my reputation, my peace. I pictured him smirking somewhere, reveling in the chaos he'd sown. But I wasn't the same woman he'd kicked out months ago. I wasn't going to cower. If he wanted to play dirty, I'd bury him. I hired a private investigator the next day. A grizzled man named Tom Carver, recommended by Harold. Tom was in his 50s, with a weathered face and a no-nonsense attitude that put me at ease. Give me a week, he said, lighting a cigarette as we sat in my living room. If your son's behind this, I'll find the trail. While Tom worked, I kept my routine, refusing to let the rumors cage me. But the harassment escalated. Graffiti appeared on my garage door. Thief in red spray paint. Anonymous letters stuffed my mailbox, accusing me of everything from blackmail to prostitution. One evening as I walked to my car, a group of teenagers on bikes circled me, shouting, "Hey rich lady, how many old men did you scam to get that house?" I clenched my jaw and kept walking, but inside I was seething. Ethan wasn't just spreading lies, he was turning my new life into a battlefield. Tom called 6 days later. Got him, he said, his voice gruff. Ethan's holed up in a cheap motel across the state line. He's been paying lowlifes to stir trouble. Kids to throw rocks, punks to tag your place. He's also been calling old contacts, trying to dig up dirt on you. And get this, he reached out to your ex-husband Richard a couple weeks back. Richard. I frowned. What does he want with him? Control, Tom said. He's desperate. Thinks Richard might guilt you into caving. I've got recordings. Ethan begging him to talk you into coming home. Richard shut him down, but Ethan's unhinged. He's not stopping. I thanked Tom and hung up, my mind racing. Richard. I hadn't spoken to him in over 20 years, not since the divorce. He'd washed his hands of Ethan and me when he walked out, chasing a life with a new wife and kids of his own. Why Ethan thought he'd help now was beyond me, unless he was grasping at straws. That night my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but I answered anyway. Margaret. Richard's voice was older, rougher but unmistakable. It's me. I froze. What do you want? Just a heads up, he said, casual as if we'd spoken yesterday. Ethan came to see me, cried his eyes out, begged me to talk you into going back to him. I told him it's not my business. I'm not his father, never was biologically. Even did a paternity test to shut him up. But he's convinced I'm lying, that you're still his one and only mother. I didn't tell him the full story, kept my promise from way back. Figured you should know he's spiraling. Thanks, I said curtly and hung up. So Ethan knew Richard wasn't his dad. Good. One less lie to untangle when the time came. But his desperation was a warning. He wasn't just after money anymore. He wanted to break me. The next blow came a week later. I woke to a flurry of notifications, my name trending online again. Ethan had found a loophole around the injunction. He wasn't streaming himself anymore. He'd enlisted proxies. Anonymous accounts posting videos and threads claiming I'd stolen Catherine's fortune through deception. One grainy clip showed a woman who vaguely resembled me, captioned, "Margaret Turner, maid-turned-mistress, scamming her way to millions." Another alleged I'd forged the trust documents, with experts, clearly hired hacks, dissecting them for inconsistencies. The comments were vicious. "She's a criminal, lock her up. Poor Ethan, stuck with a snake like her." I called Harold immediately. "Can we sue again?" I asked, pacing the kitchen. "We can," he said. "But it'll take time to trace these accounts. He's covering his tracks, probably using burner phones or VPNs. We'll get him, but not fast." "I'm not waiting," I snapped. "He's turning my life into a circus." Tom's next report confirmed my suspicions. Ethan had moved to Canada, living under an alias in a rundown apartment in Toronto. He'd tapped into a network of petty criminals, funding them with what little cash he had left, likely from selling his car or pawning Nicole's jewelry after the divorce. "He's running a smear campaign from there," Tom said, "paying people to harass you locally and online. He's broke, but he's obsessed." I didn't hesitate. "Get me everything, names, dates, proof. I'm ending this." 2 weeks later, I had my ammunition. Tom's team tracked Ethan's payments, wire transfers to a half-dozen thugs, including one caught on camera spray painting my garage. They'd hacked into his email, uncovering messages to a shady PR guy in Toronto coordinating the online attacks. Best of all, they'd found footage of Ethan himself, ranting in a dive bar about how he'd make her pay and take back what's mine. It was enough to bury him. I took it all to Harold, who grinned like a wolf. "This isn't just defamation. It's stalking, harassment, maybe even extortion. We can go international with this. Canada's got extradition treaties." "Do it," I said. "And while you're at it, send a message to Susan and Nicole. They've been too quiet. I don't trust it." The legal wheels turned fast. Harold filed a new suit, this time with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police looped in. Within days, Ethan was arrested in Toronto, caught mid-rant on a street corner, screaming about Margaret the monster to a crowd that didn't care. The charges stacked up: cyberstalking, harassment, and conspiracy. He couldn't afford bail, let alone a lawyer. The proxies he'd hired scattered, leaving him to rot in a cell. Back home, the harassment stopped. The graffiti was scrubbed away, the letters ceased, the neighbors' stares softened. I'd won again, but at a cost. My name was still tainted online, a lingering stain from Ethan's lies. I could have let it fade, but I didn't. I went back to StreamNet one last time, launching a final stream titled "The Truth Wins." I laid out everything: Tom's evidence, the arrest, the proof of Ethan's vendetta. "He didn't just betray me," I said, my voice calm but cutting. "He tried to destroy me. But I'm still here. And he's not." The response was overwhelming. Viewers flooded in, donations pouring as apologies filled the chat. "We were wrong, sorry Margaret. You're a badass, stay strong." He got what he deserved. I didn't keep the money. Donated it all to a children's hospital, the same one that saved Ethan's life decades ago. Felt right. Susan and Nicole surfaced a week later, right on cue. Susan showed up at my gate with a bouquet of cheap flowers and a crocodile tear smile. "Margaret, we're so sorry," she cooed. "We didn't know Ethan would go this far. Can't we put this behind us? Family's family." Nicole stood behind her, arms crossed, her face a mask of forced humility. "Yeah, we miss you. Ethan's gone, let's start over." I laughed, cold and sharp. "Family? You kicked me out, mocked me, tried to ship me off to scrub floors in a nursing home. You don't miss me, you miss my money. Get off my property." Susan's mask slipped, her eyes narrowing. "You'll regret this, Margaret. You can't just erase us." "Watch me," I said, and shut the gate in their faces. That night I sold the villas. The market was hot, and I walked away with a $2 million profit. I didn't need the grandeur anymore, it had been a statement, not a home. With Harold's help, I bought a modest house by a quiet lake west of the city. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine: white clapboard walls, a wraparound porch, a garden I could lose myself in. I packed up my paintings, my books, my piano, and left the past behind. Months later, I heard Ethan had been convicted. 2 years in a Canadian prison, no parole. The lake house became my refuge. I planted roses, brewed dark roast coffee, painted under the trees. No one called me mom to demand something. No one accused me of being cold. I was just Margaret, a woman who'd fought and won. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of my reflection in the lake and smile. The final revenge wasn't the lawsuits or the arrest. It was this living well on my terms, while Ethan drowned in the wreckage of his own making. He'd wanted to break me, but he'd only set me free. The lake house was smaller than the villas, but it felt infinitely larger in all the ways that mattered. Its white clapboard walls glowed in the morning sun, the wraparound porch creaking softly under my steps as I carried my coffee outside each day. The garden stretched toward the water's edge, a riot of roses and wisteria I'd planted myself, their fragrance mingling with the crisp, clean air. Beyond the trees, the lake shimmered, a quiet, endless mirror reflecting the sky. I'd traded the gated community's sterile luxury for this. A simple, honest corner of the world where no one knew my name, my past, or the $8 million that had once defined me. For the first time in decades, I wasn't running, fighting, or proving anything. I was just living. Mornings became my favorite ritual. I'd wake with the dawn, brew a pot of dark roast coffee, the kind Catherine had loved, and sit on the porch with a book or my sketch pad. The silence was a gift. No angry voices, no demands, no guilt trips echoing through my head. Sometimes I'd paint, setting up my easel beneath the oak trees, letting the brush glide across the canvas as I captured the lake's shifting colors or the curve of a petal. Other days I'd walk the shoreline, barefoot in the cool grass, listening to the water lap against the rocks. It was a life I'd never dared imagine, one I'd spent 30 years believing I didn't deserve. The money was still there, of course, millions sitting in accounts growing quietly with interest, but it no longer ruled me. I'd sold the villas at the peak of the market, pocketing a tidy profit that I funneled into the lake house and a few modest investments. The rest I left alone, a safety net I rarely thought about. I didn't need extravagance. The house came with a piano, a small upright model I'd restored myself, and that was enough. I'd play in the evenings, Moonlight Sonata, the piece Catherine had taught me, letting the notes fill the air as the sun dipped below the horizon. It wasn't about wealth anymore. It was about peace. The past didn't vanish entirely, though. Echoes of it lingered, faint but persistent, like ripples on the lake after a stone's been thrown. I'd cut all ties with Ethan, Nicole, and Susan, blocked their numbers, ignored their attempts to worm back into my life. The house I'd bought for Ethan and Nicole came back to me 6 months after the second lawsuit, the court ruling in my favor with irrefutable evidence of my payments. I didn't keep it. I sold it the day the title transferred, using the proceeds to fund a scholarship for single mothers at a local community college. It felt right, closing that chapter by giving others the chance I'd never had. Susan and Nicole faded into irrelevance. I heard through Monica that Nicole had remarried quickly, a quiet accountant with no connection to her mother's lofty social circle. Susan, humiliated by Ethan's arrest and the loss of the house, retreated from her clique of judgmental friends, her influence dwindling to nothing. They didn't dare approach me again, not after I'd shut the gate in their faces. I liked to think they'd learned their lesson, but I didn't care enough to find out. Ethan was a different story. For a while, I heard nothing, blissful silence after his conviction in Canada. 2 years in prison, no parole, a fitting end to his spiral. I assumed he'd disappear, swallowed by the consequences of his choices. But life has a way of circling back, and one afternoon, nearly 3 years after I'd moved to the lake, a chance conversation brought him into focus again. I was at a cafe in town, chatting with an old friend from my housekeeping days, Lila, a kind woman who'd always had a knack for gossip. We sat by the window, nursing cups of tea, when she leaned in with a gleam in her eye. "You'll never guess what I heard," she said. "Ethan's in Canada still. Runs his mouth online, bragging about how free he is up there. Thinks he's some big shot now." I raised an eyebrow, stirring my tea. "Free? He's out already." "Parole maybe," Lila shrugged. "Or he's lying. You know how he is." But I saw a clip, someone posted it on X. "He's not looking good, Margaret. Thought you might want to know." Curiosity got the better of me. That night, back at the lake house, I opened my laptop and searched his name. It didn't take long to find the video. And shaky, low-quality upload from a street corner in Toronto. There he was, hunched beside a trash bin, his hair matted, his clothes ragged. He gnawed on a piece of moldy bread, his eyes vacant, unfocused. Every few seconds, he'd break into a manic grin, muttering to himself, then dissolve into sobs that shook his whole body. The caption read, "Ethan Turner, once a streamer, now a ghost." Comments below were brutal. "Karma's a bitch. This is what happens when you bite the hand that fed you." Lost his mind and his soul. I watched it twice, my finger hovering over the replay button. I waited for something. Anger, satisfaction, pity to rise up. But nothing came. The man on the screen wasn't my son anymore. Not even the bitter, vengeful Ethan who tried to ruin me. He was a stranger. A shell hollowed out by his own resentment. He'd had every chance I'd fought to give him. A life pulled from the brink, a home and education, and he'd thrown it all away. I closed the laptop and stepped onto the porch, letting the cool night air wash over me. He was gone, truly gone, and I was done carrying him. Years slipped by, soft and slow. The lake house became more than a refuge. It became home. I made friends in town, not many but enough. There was Lila, who dropped by with homemade pies and stories. Tom Carver, who'd retired from investigating but still checked in now and then. And a quiet widow named Grace who shared my love of gardening. They didn't know the full story. Just that I'd moved here for a fresh start. And I liked it that way. No one called me mom to demand something. No one judged me for the scars of my past. I was just Margaret, the woman with the roses and the piano. Sometimes people still asked about Ethan. Grace brought it up one afternoon as we pruned the wisteria. "You ever regret it?" she said, her voice gentle. "Taking him in, I mean. After all he did." I used to pause at that question, turning it over in my mind like a stone, searching for cracks. But now I just smiled, clipping a stray vine. "No," I said. "I don't regret it. I regret not seeing sooner that kindness shouldn't come at the cost of myself. Learning to protect me, that was the real lesson." Grace nodded, her eyes warm. "You're a strong one, Margaret. Stronger than most." I didn't argue. I wasn't a saint, never had been. I'd made mistakes, trusted too long, given too much, but I'd survived them. And in the surviving, I'd found something better. A life that was mine alone. One spring morning, as I sat on the porch with my coffee, a letter arrived, the first in months. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the postmark from a small town in Oregon. I opened it, curious, and a single page slipped out, typed in neat, precise font. "Dear Margaret, you don't know me, but I owe you a debt I can't repay. My name is Sarah Jensen. 3 years ago I was a single mom, barely scraping by, when I got a scholarship to community college, the one you funded. Changed everything. I graduated last year, got a job as a nurse, and now I can give my daughter the life I never thought possible. I don't know your story, but I know you made mine happen. Thank you. If you're ever in Oregon, I'd love to buy you a coffee. With gratitude, Sarah." I read it twice, a lump rising in my throat. I set the letter down and looked out at the lake, its surface catching the sunlight in 1,000 tiny sparks. Catherine's face flickered in my mind, her silver hair, her steady blue eyes, the way she believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. This was her legacy too, passed through me to someone I'd never meet. It wasn't the millions or the houses that mattered. It was this small, quiet ripples of good in a world that had once felt so cruel. I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer, a keepsake for the days when doubt crept in. Then I grabbed my sketchpad and headed to the garden, the breeze carrying the scent of roses. The air was clean, the world slow, and life gentle. I'd fought for this, bled for it, in ways Ethan would never understand, and I'd won. As I sketched the lake, my pencil tracing its curves, I heard my own breath in the stillness. For the first time, I belonged to myself. And it turned out that wasn't too late at all.